order. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're live.
Okay. I've lost my little thing. Oh, it's right there. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning certain gatherings such as in-person meetings. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. That being said, we need to have John, can we have a roll call vote for attendance?
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Jonathan Pope,
Here.
Ben Lummis,
Yes, here, present.
Kathy Clancy,
Here.
Richard Sapphire,
Not here.
Matthew Fusco.
Not here. We've given him the night off.
Sorry?
We've given him the night off.
Gotcha. Amy Pasquarello.
Here.
Thank you. Grant Harris,
Here.
John Dunn,
Not here.
Gary Frisch,
Not here.
Katie Eunice.
Here.
Thank you. Tony Gross,
Not here.
Stacy Capone.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Stafford.
Here.
Yeah, Mark's not a.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm here.
That we have 7 members in which is a quorum. So we will move on to the next order of business, which is the approval of the minutes of the East Veterans Memorial School. This is all wrong. Anyways, the minutes of September 14th, 2023. Are there any corrections or omissions? Okay, seeing none, I will make a motion that we accept the meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote?
Jonathan Pope,
Yes.
Ben Lummis.
I'll abstain as I wasn't there.
Okay. Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Richard Sapphire is not here. Matthew Fusco is not here. Amy Pasquarello,
Yes.
Grant Harris,
Yes.
John Dunn, not here. Gary Frisch, not here. Katie Eunice,
Abstain. I wasn't here last time.
Tony Gross is not here. Stacy Capone,
Yes.
thank you. I believe that's everybody.
Is that it? That's 5 in favor and 2 abstentions, so it passes. And we'll move on to the next order of business, which is the approval of invoices. And I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Jonathan. Nice to see you all again. We have 9 invoices up for approval for this month. Last month, the invoices were approved by the invoice subcommittee. We have 3 invoices from CDW. That was for technology. That was part of the buyout for the school. First invoice was for $58,862. We had another one for $11,172 and one for $23,820. So those are all for various technology items that were purchased through the work with Advance. We have an invoice from Doran Whittier, invoice number 54, an amount of $20,044.95. That was for the architectural closeout work from last month. And it also included some charges for the radon evaluation that was done earlier on the job, and also an acoustical study. That acoustical study study was done for some of the rooftop equipment and the enclosure on the generator. And as a result of that study, we were able to go with a different generator enclosure that saved the project a significant amount of money. We also have an invoice from Hertz for $3,400.16. That was for some gym equipment. And we have 2 invoices from Pro AV. That was also a technology provider, included TV stands, cabling, cameras, things like that. The first invoice for $20,405 and the second one for $29,850. Next, we have a monthly invoice from Turner & Townsend Erie for the OPM services for the month of October. And finally, we have an invoice from our CM, WT Rich. This is for their closeout work and punch list work that was done in October. That invoice is $1,222,086. So overall, sorry, I think I'm reading the invoices from our last month on WT Rich. Can you confirm that, John? I see the WT Rich here invoice in the slide is for $387,200.
Correct. My apologies on that. It should have been corrected.
Okay. The number I said is correct, the $1,222,086, right?
Correct.
Okay. So let's see, I don't have the total for those 9 invoices here. Pull that up. I apologize about that.
You want me to calculate it really quick?
So that total is $1,449,640.11. So all these invoices were provided in your packet for review. So
It's just the summary that's incorrect. Is that the WT?
yes, yes, yeah, that's correct.
On the summary, but the invoices that we got are all
Correct.
That's correct.
right. They're sideways.
So once again, 9 invoices, all of the ones that we just mentioned, for a total of $1,449,640.11. And on this particular slide right here, this number is wrong somehow for WT Rich, but everything else is correct.
Okay, are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll make a motion that we approve the 9 invoices as presented. I only got part of this, but for
Yes.
a total of $1,449,000 and something else.
$640.
$640.11.
Yeah.
Okay. 11 cents.
Thank you, Gary. We have a new member.
Yes. Yeah, we should note that Gary is here at this point.
Yep.
And I so move.
All right. We'll vote for the
Somebody
Second.
second.
I'll
There we-
second.
There we go. And
Jonathan Pope,
yes,
Ben Lemus,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Richard Safier is out. Matthew Fusco is out. Amy Pascarello,
Yes.
Grant Harris,
Yes.
John Dunn, out. Gary Fish,
Yes.
Katie Eunice,
Yes.
Tony Gross is out. Stacy Capone,
Yes.
all votes are in.
okay, it's unanimous. And those invoices will be moved on to be paid. Next order of business is the monthly update. And once again, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Thanks, Jonathan. So yeah, it's nice to see you all again. I think our last meeting was in September. School had just opened up. And we were happy to see the doors open on time, all the kids come in. So at that time, we did manage to get the school open, but there were still a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up. So that's kind of what has been happening in general over the past few months, getting the punch list items complete. We will still have quite a bit of activities that will continue to stretch out over the next year. I'll go over that in a little more detail on the schedule component. We continue to track within the budget. We have some contingency funds remaining. Those could be used to fund some additional items that were out of reach at the bid stage. Some of that has already taken place with a few small items that have been added to the school. But that is available for this project. So generally, things are going quite well. We had some miscellaneous glitches. Some of them were mostly technology items, and those have all been straightened out. So the project is moving ahead well and throughout the closeout phase and the punch list phase. If we look at the overall activities for each of the groups, there's been some slight shift here on the OPM side. We've been managing completion items, working on contracts, finances, a lot in that regard, and then working on resolutions to miscellaneous items that have come up as the school is now in session and the teachers are using it. We found, this or that needed to be addressed. So all those things have been worked on over the past few months to get the building really fully operational. The designer's been working on approving the closeout submittals, reviewing all the punch list items, and also working on any final contract changes. The CM continues to work on the scheduling, quality control, and really turning over the building complete to the owner. As I said, we have the substantial completion certificate. The building is occupied, but there's still a few items that need to be taken care of before everything is fully in the owner's hands. So if we look at our finances, we're billed 97% for the project to date. As I said, we still have a healthy amount of contingency remaining. So this will cover some of the outstanding change orders that we're processing and also leave some additional money for some funds or for some things that we could add to the project. You can also see that for each of the subgroups, the OPM designer, the CM, the billings relative to the contract are all in the 90s. So there will be billings that will extend for some time, but the amount of billings will just be quite a bit lower, and we'll see that on our cash flow graph coming up. I also wanted to touch a little bit on workforce utilization. We have this graph that we've shown in all of our monthly meetings. This is for the amount of for the dollar amount of contracts that have been awarded to minority and women businesses. So we had goals both for the designer and the contractor on this project, and overall for the project, we vastly exceeded those goals. One of the other things that we track is the workforce utilization. So the difference here is that when we're talking about minorities or women, this first group has to do with who owns the company to which the work is awarded. When we look at workforce utilization, we're actually looking at the employees of those companies that are working on this particular project. So it's a different matrix that's used, and it's also very helpful. Right here, you have the information for October. So just to show you, how we track these things. So for October, we had 100% of the people that were working on this project were part of the minority group. So that far exceeded the 15% goal. And we also have this data for the whole project. We've been in the process of compiling that as we work on some of these closeout documents and wrapping all this stuff up. And I'll be sharing that with you in a future meeting where we stand on the project to date. Any questions about any of those items so far?
I do have a question.
Yes.
So getting back to the previous slide,
Okay.
what is the estimate of how much the cash will be remaining at the end of the project? Where's,
Yeah,
the-
that's a good question. The exact dollar amount, isn't known at this point because we are still negotiating through quite a few different change orders. And there are still a few items on the construction side that need to be resolved. What I can tell you is that it's a very healthy amount that should cover all those items and leave a significant amount of money that can be either used for other project components or that will ultimately be returned to the city for additional
Okay.
funds.
okay, I'm a numbers guy, so I'm looking for a number as opposed to a healthy amount.
I don't think I'm prepared to give you a number at this point.
What's that?
I don't think Brian's prepared to give you a number at this point because there's still a lot of, experiences to go. Is that
There
right?
also, yeah, and there also may be some more additional funding coming from the state for the projects through their last legislative action. So,
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Both of those items are correct. So I'm not trying to avoid your question, Gary, but just kind of asking like, what's the final score at the end of the game? And the game isn't over yet.
I understand.
Yeah. So
He's a Cubs fan, so he wants to keep score here.
So yeah, I mean, I can definitely tell you that we're right now where we are, what we're anticipating. There's still a number of variables, but we're expecting that that's going to be well over $1 million. So
Okay.
it's not a small amount, but we'll know a little more as we deal with all these things.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any questions on the workforce utilization? Okay. So here's where we stand with the contracts. There's not much change here. You can see our potential change orders that has jumped up quite a bit. And that's because, we're getting these things pulled together, right? So the various subcontractors are preparing the potential change orders for various items that already happened and we'll need to get through and get those processed. We have over 125 so far on the job that have been processed and about 50 that are open at this point. Since our last meeting, we don't have any official change orders that have been processed, but as you can see with the amount of open potential change orders that exist, we'll be rolling up a number of those into change orders. We'll try to be as efficient as possible so we can have a lot of PCOs included in one change order to be less paperwork for Stacy and everyone for office. Here's where we are in cash flow. So you can see we're projecting just over 60 million so far in total project cost. Here's where we're expecting that, as I said, we'll have billings that will extend for quite some time, but we're going to see that tapering off significantly just overall for the project. And the same thing, the same trend basically continues for each of the groups. Some of them tapering off a little faster, but others, so maybe with the designer here, but others tapering off a little more slowly depending on the scope of work in their particular contracts and how that pertains to closeout activities and activities that will stretch out over the next year or so. So I decided to put together an updated schedule here to help better understand this. So you'll see at the top here, this is the bar schedule, simplified version that we've had throughout this whole project. So we were previously tracking all the activities under this construction section right here. So what I've done is take this closeout section and provide a little bit more clarity about the types of works that are going on from the various team members during this closeout phase. So you can see the closeout phase started around the time that substantial completion was reached in August and will likely extend through November of 2024. Most of that work, if you kind of draw an imaginary line, is going to fall to the left here. So that'll be wrapped up by the end of the year. But there definitely will be some items that will extend into 2024 and as I said, all the way almost to the end of 2024. So these are the things that are being done right now in the project. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these as we talk about each of the team members and what they've been doing. But hopefully this will provide a little more insight into what happens after the school is open and, you know, pretty much constructed. What is everyone doing? I want to draw your attention here to a few dates. So next month, being December already, our plan is to have an invoice subcommittee meeting. We won't be having a full committee meeting at that month. There just isn't really that much news that needs to be shared, but we will have one in January. So again, looking at this schedule that we can see here on the main part of the screen, most of its activities will be complete by that January meeting. So we'll be able to update you on what's been happening with these various parts of the project. As far as the schedule goes, you know, we did have an on-time opening, but we've had some material shortages and weather impacts on some items that have pushed this group here, this remaining work item, out quite a bit. So we've talked about some of those previously. We've talked about like the IT switches that were simply not available. One of the weather impact items was the painting around the playground. We kind of ran out of good weather days, so that had to be pushed out until next spring. Are there any questions on this bar chart here for the schedule of the closeout items? Okay. So let me move on to the next item.
Brian, sorry. You might be getting to this, but can you just sort of help the building committee understand sort of what our role is from here, or what you expect, what a project would expect of a building committee, going forward?
Sure.
Is it meeting every couple of months like we've done, or just to help us understand, what we should be paying attention to, or what our role is going forward here, and for how long, honestly.
Yeah, so the role really hasn't changed. Your role is to provide general oversight on the project. As your OPM, we're reporting to you about what's happening, and we're asking you, as we had previously, to make and approve different decisions. So the main one will be the continual approval of invoices. Any change orders that are brought up that exceed the $100,000 amount that was established for the full committee, or the $50,000 amount that was set up for the change order subcommittee. So we'll need to have the committee engaged in those tasks. And there will be things that might come up that will be requested for changes to the job. So, it depends on what the scope of those things are. But when those requests come up, those are decisions that have to be made by the school building committee. So we will manage the timeliness of those, and depending on what they are, we'll bring them up to the committee when necessary. There's a few items that we'll be looking at tonight that we'll be looking for input on. And as far as how long this work will go, the full closeout of the MSBA doesn't happen until the last check has been paid and all the accounts have been settled. So what I think we would like to see is at the final stage of the project, we would like to provide a report to the full committee about where we ended up with everything. But in the interim, I don't see that we need to have as many regular meetings as we've had before. So right now, I'd like to have a meeting scheduled in January. And then once we get to January, we can decide when the next meeting is appropriate based on what's happening at that time.
Cool. And I think, thank you, Brian. It's very helpful. I hope it helps the other members. You may want, I think we can talk in the coming days about perhaps coming to a BNF subcommittee meeting or the full school meeting, yourself, to explain some, just really, focus on this slide, what's happening now, but also what happens from here to the end of the project. This is the school committee to, haven't given an update to them for a long time. they've obviously been focused on the school getting open and all that great work. But it might be helpful for them to understand process as well, because this part is a little less obvious, I think to folks.
Yeah, if you want to schedule something, a small presentation to the school committee, we're happy to do that and share some information with them on what's going on.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so what's new with the OPM? Well, we've continued with overall project management and owner representation. There's continual activities that happen out in the job site that we're there to help coordinate and resolve. Almost all of the outstanding issues that have come up with the building have been addressed to date. We had some issues with the plumbing system and the fire suppression system, and just the flooring and technology, and just odds and ends here and there that needed to be seen through. So the good news is that most of those items have been cared for as of today, and there's only a few of those that are remaining. We also are working with the city on insurance items, on grant programs, on the MSBA grant, kind of separately, and also the MSBA reimbursement. So to date, we've received about $24 million in grant funds. The process with the MSBA has been unusual on this job because of the lawsuits that we faced early on that kind of set everything into motion at a much later date. So we are just now getting the project funding agreement together that normally would have been issued immediately after construction bid. So that's kind of the next milestone with the MSBA. The draft PFA, or project funding agreement, has already been approved. Final one's going to be issued for execution within the next couple of days. After that, we will be getting a second project funding agreement. So this also is unusual. This second project funding agreement is going to include the additional revenues that have been allocated by the MSBA to projects such as ours that face very challenging economic conditions on account of the high construction escalation that we saw. So we don't know what the final amount of that will be, but that will follow in the second PFA for the second contract that will be executed with the city. Those funds will be allocated within the budget, and so we'll know how they will apply to grant limits that are set. Once that is complete, we will be asking for a budget revision request as we move some of the funds around. We've been wanting to do that for some time, but we've had to wait until these project funding agreements were established. And once all that is complete, we'll have a much better understanding of what the final anticipated grant will be for this project. So, there's still a process that's involved, but the good news is that the amount of awards are, they're not going to be less than what we had before. And we should be able to get additional funding into the city's hands from this additional money that's being made available to the MSBA. So I know that probably sounds a little confusing, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
For Brian, pardon me, folks, but can you just clarify? So I understand the second PFA, and coming as Kathy said, the additional funding that the state's making available to projects like ours. For the first part, I'm a little. Can you clarify? I thought we already had a signed PFA. I thought we were already getting reimbursements. Is that the case? I heard you say that.
Yes, and thanks, Ben. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't clarify that well. It's actually a PFA bid amendment. So that's correct. We do have a project funding agreement that was executed very early on in the project. But
right.
Once the construction bids come in, a bid amendment is executed. And okay. I'm sorry, that's what I was referring to.
Right. So if the bid amendment is executed, which is part of the process, I understand, And then, but we've been getting reimbursements regularly, as you described in meetings and sort of stuff. Okay, great. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, any other questions on that? Like I said, I know it's a little complicated, but.
No, I mean, listen, it's, as Kathy said earlier, we don't know what that additional funding will be, but that's a big deal, you know, and that's really good for the, you know, we're in great budgetary shape right now, and to get that reimbursement, you know, to be even higher, we'll find out what that is. That's really good news. That's good news for the city, good news for taxpayers. That's excellent.
Yeah. Also, as the OPM, we've begun working on the DCAM evaluation. So, you know, that's a responsibility that we perform on behalf of the owner to provide feedback on all the workers that have been on site. That helps then other municipalities or even maybe the city of Gloucester on another project to make sure that they're able to select quality candidates to do the work. Let's see here, for the community, there really aren't any major issues last month. We did have some questions about the lighting on the site. I think there was a few nights where the lights were on throughout the night. And the reason for that was the lighting controls. That was one of the technology issues where we had a few hiccups that had to be worked through and get things fully coordinated. So that has all been completed. The lighting is set to go off at 10 o'clock right now and on the inside, and it gets dimmed on the outside. So as this is turned over to the city, which we're in that process right now, the city will be able to stipulate all kinds of things. You know, they can say, well, we would like them to go off at 9 o'clock, or we'd like to stay on to 10:30. For the exterior lights, we have dimming in place where they're going to dim 50%. If more or less was desired, that could also be accomplished. So that's one of the nice things about having this technology in the building, is that you can really customize it to the needs of the community and also to maximize the energy savings. But in the next month and even the next 2 months, we're not really expecting any impact to the neighbors at any work on site. So
Just Brian, sorry, a couple of just I want to just thank Tom Hood for reaching out to some folks in the community to understand their concerns about the lighting, and then really working with the team to address those. I appreciate that, Tom. I do want to take a moment just to there are sort of two issues that are well, one that's been resolved fully, one that is still ongoing, just to make sure the building committee is aware of them. I think everyone has heard and is pretty knowledgeable about the waste line backup that we experienced. I think it was September now. I can't remember honestly. But just that was disruption, you know, caused by you know a plumbing error. But it was handled by the private team, you know, Dennis and the Turner Townsend team, Tom and WT Rich team, you know, really rapidly. DPW, support from the city. It was a difficult situation. Really impacted the kindergarten, you know, 5 classrooms in that wing on the first floor, and difficult for them and their students. But our teachers, especially the project team, handled it very, very well. It was remedied, and folks were back in their classrooms within, I think it was 6 days afterward. And so just want to, you know, acknowledge to the committee here that was something that was disruption, but really handled well. So thank you to the team for dealing with that. And then an ongoing issue is just Brian mentioned it, but with the floors, having some little challenges on mastic and the glue seeping through, and which then attracts dirt. Kathy Fancy's seen this, I've seen this. It's still ongoing and trying to work it out, but the teams have been working, you know, Rich and CBR and Turner Townsend have really been, you know, working together to figure this out with the installer, with the company that supplies the product. And I don't think it's fully resolved yet. They're working through it. So it's something you might hear about, probably not, but something that the teachers are aware of, I'm aware of. But that's really been, and those are really, in terms of, you know, real hiccups or ongoing challenges. You know, one was an immediate challenge that was addressed Lights have been addressed, obviously, as Brian said, and then now it's just this floor thing, but folks are really working actively on it, so I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Ben. There are a lot of these types of things that we deal with, and that's, I think one of the benefits that we feel we bring as a project management team is that we work with the team members to get these things taken care of, and so the ownership team doesn't have to worry as much. But sometimes you do have those things that come up on the weekend and does affect the school, and we'll do our best to get those taken care of. As far as the floor goes, yeah, we've made a lot of progress. We've been having discussions and negotiations with the manufacturer and the installer. The manufacturer flew their team out, I think it was this week. I remember correctly.
This week, yeah.
Yeah, this week. And they were there, testing some new cleaning products, modifying a little bit the techniques that we use to get a better result. The preliminary results are that works very well, but we're going to give it a few weeks to make sure that that's satisfactory before we apply that to the rest of the building. So, and we shared that with the DPW today. That was a question that came up from Mike Hale. So, yeah, we continue to work through these things. And with that plumbing issue, the reason that came up was there was something that had maybe fallen into the waste line, and it wasn't the full block. And we had been asked by the DPW to flush out some of these lines, which was kind of something that the work that was required had already been done. This was additional work that we were happy to comply with to help make sure that the situation was satisfactory. It was unfortunate that led to this backup, but I guess the plus side is that it got taken care of. It's now fully fixed, and we can move on. So, yeah, lots of items like that. As far as the designer goes, they're continuing, to stay active in the project, reviewing the submittals for the closeout documents, answering any RFIs that come up, inspecting the final punch list items. So as the contractor gets those completed, the architect comes back to verify that that's satisfactory before they can take that off of their list and then ultimately get paid for that kind of work. So they're participating in regular project meetings as well. We've also asked them to issue some proposals for some additional items. So we talked about this earlier that, with some of these contingency funds that are available, maybe we can do something. And, we're not interested in just spending money for no good reason, but if there are things that come up where there's a real need and it can be addressed by the project, those are things that we're looking into. So one of these examples was for a material change in the calming room. So, we had reports from the school department that, there was some destruction that was happening in those spaces from, the students. And they're wondering if we could put in a different product that was more durable. So this is one of the things that we're looking at, getting a proposal together, seeing if we can cost effectively address that. There was also a request from the DPW to make a modification to one of the heat pump units over by the gym area because it was difficult for them to access the filters and be able to maintain them. So, there are these tweaks that we can accommodate. And, since we do have money left in the budget, we can make those adjustments, ultimately leading to a better long-term solution for the school district and oftentimes lower maintenance costs and things like that. There's also a long-term benefit from those. Another thing that the design team has been working on is finalizing all the images with the school district. So I'm very happy to say that we have final selections in place. This was a long process, and I think everyone worked very hard to make sure we have some beautiful images. So I wanted to share these with you. This is the first image that was selected. This image was taken by Matt Fusco and edited by his daughter, Julia, of the Eastern Point Lighthouse. So just as a reminder, in case you're not aware, these images are going to be mounted in the main hallway, that atrium space when you come in, up on the wall to the right. And these are 4 larger panels that make up the whole image. So this is the first one. Here's the second one of Harbor Boats. This image is by Talia Taylor. And then the final one here of Portuguese Hill is a drone image by Martin Del Vecchio. So it'll be nice, just to remind everyone, the concept here was to have images that are representative of both East Gloucester and Veteran School, which is up in the Portuguese Hill neighborhood, and then how those two schools tie together through the harbor. So that was the focus, and I'm happy to say that these images are now ready. They were sent off to W.T. Rich to get printed and mounted so that those can be installed. Tom, do you have any idea when you think those are going to be ready for installation?
I talked to Randy Wood at Sandra Signs this afternoon. He's going to open these up tomorrow, and as long as he's going to print a copy to make sure that it's going to print the way that it should. He's going to let me know tomorrow if he sees any issues. And then from there, it's probably about 5 weeks to get the order done, and then we have to schedule it.
Okay, thanks. So again, this is one of those items that was on the list. These are work items that were part of the project, but for one reason or another, they had to get pushed out. So we have a few of those remaining work items. Was there a question?
Yeah, Brian, sorry. Is interest in giving the photographers credit in some way, shape, or form? I'm sure, like a plaque, maybe something you might like a museum plaque or something like that. Has anyone talked about that in any specificity? And if not, how can we get that done?
Yeah, so I've referred that to Doran Whittier as the designer, that they can help accomplish that, and I've asked them to reach out to the group that helped select these pictures. I can let Michelle talk about that, but I think the suggestion was perhaps to have a plaque that's lower by eye level, rather than up by the images, and it would reference images so that people can see more clearly who that was. Michelle, I believe you're on here, right?
Yep.
There you are.
Yeah, so we had a discussion in-house. We thought that perhaps, given the story that we like to tell about these three images, about how they are from East Gloucester and from Portuguese Hill and how they all come together, that story might want to be on display at a level where people can actually see the photographs, see who's taken the photographs, and then also read the story about why we chose these particular images. So rather than having plaques that might be located closer to the photographs, which are up on the wall pretty high, we thought that maybe you might want to have this story with that information in the display case that is adjacent to the lobby area, where people might be waiting around and actually read about the reasons why these photos were taken. I don't know how you feel about that, but that was one of the options that we thought might be a good way to go that would tell this whole story about these photos.
That sounds great to me. I think that is, from my point of view anyway, that sounds right on target.
I agree.
It makes sense. With people should be able to see them and read them, as opposed to putting them way up on the wall.
Yeah, and I love telling the story. I know it's very purposeful, and I think we've carried it out quite well, we'll talk about this more, but I believe each photographers have a connection to the schools. Obviously, Matt Fusco and his daughter, and then Halia, I think, was a student in one of the schools. I'm not sure about that, but I think so. And then Marty Del Vecchio, longtime parent in Gloucester. So, anyway, but someone draft a first version of that, then I'm sure Amy or Matt or I can snap it around.
That would be great. We'll start that first draft.
Great.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, what's next here? Sustainability. So yeah, this is a I think, Ben, you asked, what does the building committee do, over the next few months? So this was one of those issues that came up where we need some input from the building committee on how they want to move forward. So when this project was designed, we set a goal of achieving LEED Gold, which is a very high standard for school buildings. There are not very many that achieve that LEED Gold standard. And I'm happy to say that we have been able to accomplish our goal to reach the correct amount of points to get LEED Gold. However, we had hoped to get some additional points that would really secure that spot. And unfortunately, one of the main ones was the indoor air quality that we didn't qualify for. We talked about this previously. It's not really a problem with the quality of the air in the school, but LEED has a very, seems like arbitrary low threshold, and it's such a low threshold that the outside air in Gloucester actually exceeds that threshold. So that's an example of one of them that we are likely not going to get. So we have worked with our sustainability consultant to figure out how can we go about making sure that we will achieve that LEED Gold when we submit our review to the U.S. Green Building Council. And what they've suggested is that probably the most effective way to do that would be to purchase some renewable energy credits. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with what those are. I'll try to just keep it pretty simple. But when you generate energy, if you generate energy in a renewable way, such as, let's say, solar or wind, you can sell that energy to the grid, to customers. But you can also sell something called a renewable energy credit. That money that those people receive that are selling this energy is used to offset some of the startup costs for these types of energy production. So by us channeling some of our energy purchase to these renewable sources, we can achieve some additional points for the LEED process that'll enable us to have a very high level of confidence that when we submit to the U.S. Green Building Council, we will be able to achieve that LEED Gold status. Without doing that, even though we have enough points, there is a chance that when they review the application, that they say, well, this doesn't quite meet it. So it's just, it's some guidance that's being provided by our sustainability consultant who works on, these LEED projects for all kinds of clients. And just with their experience, their recommendation was it's best to go with a few extra points to ensure that you meet it, because if you don't, you won't get it, and then you have to resubmit, and there's additional costs and a lot of additional time with that. So what you can see here on the slide is that we have currently 59 yes points, 1 likely point, and 1 unlikely point. We need 60 required points to reach LEED Gold. And this says what those likely or unlikely points are. So our recommendation is that we add 2 or 3 additional points. Here you have some different options of how those could be accomplished. I mentioned the renewable energy credit. That would probably be our first option. We could also consider doing an acoustical study, but for the cost of that and the amount of points that we would get, I wouldn't suggest that. A daylight study, the return on investment there is pretty good in terms of number of points, but we don't know what the study will yield. I would say there's a very good chance that we could qualify, but until that study is actually done, there is no guarantee. And then the last item on here is about adding photovoltaics, so like solar panels on the roof. That's an excellent thing to do, but the amount of points that it'll get us will be 1 to 4, depending on how much power we can generate. So we'd have to study this first before we actually know how many points. So for, I think, very little money, we're talking about 1 point being worth $2,500. So if we were to add 2 or 3 points, we'd be looking at $5,000 to $7,500 in the purchase of renewable energy credits, which would be good for the environment as well, and would enable us to assure we have that LEED Gold certification that the entire project team has worked very hard to accomplish. To get to this level, we're even at LEED Gold, as I said, is not something that most schools attain. So I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on this. Like I said, our recommendation would generally be to consider the renewable energy credit as a very low cost option for getting those additional points and securing that LEED Gold. But I want to hear what the thoughts are on that.
Brian, I have a question. As far as the solar, what would the process be for that to move forward on actually putting solar into the building?
So that's actually my next slide.
Okay, all right. Well, you want to talk about energy credits?
Yeah, and the reason I'm separating them is because it will be a longer process. Like right now, we have pretty much all the paperwork ready to submit to LEED and get this documentation going and getting the approval process. So in order to do the solar, which I'll talk a little bit more, we have to first go ahead and do like the study phase, the initial evaluation to see what kind of energy we can produce. And as I said, based on the energy, that may or may not be enough to push us over that desired limit to get to LEED Gold. So I would suggest that we consider this as two separate items.
Stacy,
even though
Stacy has her hand up.
Yes, so, have you spoken to Gemma, at all that works for the city? Because we were actually thinking about doing a combined study for other buildings. So I would suggest we hold off on the solar for a minute, while we discuss maybe combining other buildings and doing a study throughout the city. So before we spend money on studies, I just want to have a conversation with Gemma on this.
Excuse me, what is the timeline? When do we need to present our case to LEED and our likely points? I mean, is it?
So, yeah, so it can be put off. You know, the general so this is part of the MSBA closeout process, and it takes a while to go and submit it to the U.S. Green Building Council, and then get those evaluated and get the responses back. But there's not a fixed. I mean, I think it's 1 year, I believe, that you have is absolute maximum in order to submit. But the general guidance is that you submit as soon as the project is complete and get that started, because it's a lengthy process. And like I said, that will also draw out the MSBA process as well.
So my suggestion would be to not draw out the process, like do this as a separate entity. I understand you want the goal, but because here's the thing, we don't want 5 different solar things going on throughout the city. We would want them all maintained on the same level. So, yeah, we need to look at more into that.
So Stacy, sorry, do you have any sense of what, I mean, Gemma's been very helpful with the school in terms of looking at electric bus options or possibilities and grant the opportunities. Gemma's great. Do you know if there's the city, it's okay if you don't, has a timeline on doing something like that across multiple buildings? Because I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense, but I'm concerned about if the city's a year and a half, 2 years away from that, then you might have to think about something else. That then anyway, any sense of what timeline is thinking about beyond?
Yeah, I'm actually having a meeting either Monday or Tuesday to talk about this further
Okay, all right.
with
Do
Tom
you,
Dunn.
okay. Would it be helpful to have someone from the schools in that conversation at this point, or is that a little bit later?
I think that would be a little later.
I think what needs to be said is that by meeting LEED Gold, our reimbursement rate from MSBA increases.
That's an important point. That's an important point that a guy like John Dunn would like to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we
I'll
can
bring that
do
up.
that by spending $7,500, I think we should proceed with that.
Well, what is the $7,500?
Well, that's to buy the credits. That's to buy the
Oh.
renewable credits. That's not to do with the solar.
Oh, okay. A separate thing. Okay.
I think the MSBA, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it is not about meeting LEED Gold.
We have to meet LEED, a LEED standard,
Correct.
but it does not have to be a LEED Gold.
That's correct.
So we're kind of talking about some different things, and I feel like we're missing a lot of information. So I was presenting this information about the LEED. You know, this is definitely one thing. But why don't I go ahead and share some additional information on the solar, and then maybe we can kind of chew on both of those a little bit and better, you know, have a better understanding of what the different aspects are. So concerning solar, so we had looked at putting solar in on the building. I think we had discussions I don't know, roughly over a year ago, because there was talk, as you mentioned, Stacy, about putting solar in on different buildings, but that never really happened. And so here we are now with the building pretty much complete, but we still have a little bit of time left. And so we're looking at, is there still a window of time to add the solar to this project? So one of the things that I would want to point out, first of all, in general, you know, without getting to the specifics about the solar, is that we have a team right now that is set up. We have an electrical engineer, you know, an architect, project manager, and a contractor. We have all those parties that are already set up that can implement this work on the project without having to go out and start the process of procuring those services with each of those parties, which can be both time consuming and also costly. A second component is that we have projects, or we have funds that have been assigned to this project to build the school and whatever items go along with that, that have already been approved for this project and have been set aside. Because of the cost savings that we were able to see throughout the course of the work, we have money now that's left over. And we had to make certain cuts at the beginning of the job and through it, I guess, based on our budgetary constraints. So when this project was designed, it was designed as solar ready. So that means that there was an anticipation that solar would be added to this building. Infrastructure would be in place, or was put in place to accommodate adding it. But as you know, we were up against the ceiling on the budget. So it's not something that we could have accomplished when we were going through the bidding phase. So we didn't have that as part of our discussions at that point. Now, however, we're in a different situation where we could take on these additional costs. So what does it really mean to add solar to the building? Well, as I said, first of all, we'd be following through on what the purpose of this building was, being designed as solar ready. And secondly, we're able to create power generation for the city that will reduce the electric bills as well as you know, some of the reliance on fossil fuels. So this is, you know, I can tell you just, you know, off the cuff that this isn't going to be enough solar to power, you know, a big part of the city, or most likely even to power all the energy needs for the building. However, it can contribute significantly to cost saving on the project. Additionally, there are grant funds that are available right now to offset a lot of these costs. So we looked at, you know, just a general sense, what what do we believe might be involved in adding solar to the project? And what we came up with is these are just very, very rough numbers, because we won't know what were the exact numbers until you go through a little more detailed design process. But we're talking roughly $500,000 in total project grants or project costs. Of that, there's a significant amount of grants that are available from two different entities, from Mass Save and the Inflation Reduction Act. With that, we might be able to get maybe even $300,000 in grants, so covering maybe 50% or more of the project, which would yield a pretty low break-even point. It depends on the project, it depends on how much power they can generate. So we're seeing break-even happen in 3 to 10 years, but with both of those added together, oftentimes it's more like 3 to 5 years. After that break-even point, there's going to be a continual cost saving to the school through the district energy savings that may amount to $50,000 to $100,000. Again, these things are always changing based on the energy costs that you'd be paying otherwise when you're purchasing electricity. Bottom line, though, is it's a significant amount of money for the budget to save that kind of money on an annual basis. So in order to get those actual values, though, we'd have to figure out, okay, how much solar can we pick up on this roof? How many panels can we put in? What are the panels that are currently available? Because those things change as well over time. And ultimately, what's that going to yield? In order for us to do that, we would need to do a study with the electrical engineer. We have asked them for a quote. I was hoping to get it this week, but because somebody was out of town, we don't have an exact quote. But we can say that it would be less than $10,000 to get that first part of this design done. If that result looks satisfactory to the school department and the city, we can move ahead with designing the full system. Roughly that would be under $100,000. Again, it might be quite a bit below that depending on the size of the system. Once you have that, you have a design. If you wanted to implement it right away, we could go ahead and get that work done as part of this project, button up the building, have everything tied in, and walk away with a building that produces part of its own energy. If you wanted to put it off and do it later as part of an overall construction project, you would still have the design information for the panels in this particular building. So that's kind of the overview. I have Mark Stafford on the line. Mark Stafford is, from our organization. He has some experience with some of these grant programs, having worked with National Grid for many years, so we can also answer some questions about that. So that's kind of an overview. I guess I'd like to hear some comments, some questions, some discussions on how we move forward. Yeah, I see Kathy and Stacy.
So Brian, does the 500,000 in project costs include the design, or is that in addition?
Yes, that would be all in solar project costs, everything. Yep.
Okay. And obviously doing a parallel path of buying the credits makes sense, and pursuing this. I mean, in addition to the finances involved in how this works, because eventually you're going to have your costs recouped because you're going to have more savings. It's the right thing to do because that's why we made the building solar ready. Okay, that's my comment.
Stacy has her hand up.
Okay, so a few things. I've been studying solar for the buildings right now under 25A, and there's so many things that you could do. So you could work with a vendor. Like, do we want to own them? Do we want to rent them? If you work with a vendor, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but you would work with the vendor. They would maintain it under a lease.
A power purchase agreement, Stacy? Is
Power,
that-
that's exactly the word I was looking for. Power purchase agreement. So if you, because who's going to maintain these? You know, DPW is out straight. I don't see them maintaining them. So the power purchase agreement, they maintain them. Basically, DPW has little involvement. Like, there's so many things to this. So I don't know what we were thinking here. You know, that's why we want to get Gemma on board on this one. The other thing is the study. Do we want to do a study just for this one building or overall throughout the city to have, so everybody has the same system? You know what I mean? So those are a few of my concerns. You know, because maybe the study's 10K just for this building, but do we want to involve other buildings or, you know, stuff like that?
Yeah, those are all good questions, Stacy. You know, Mark can talk a little bit about the power purchase agreement, but generally that used to be the standard method. And the reason it was the standard method is because there were tax credits that were offered to offset the cost of these rather than paying cash. And municipalities, as they don't pay taxes, they couldn't benefit from those tax credits. So that legislation has changed, and municipalities can now get money directly from the Fed for these projects. And not only can you do that, that's through the Inflation Reduction Act, but they can also be piggybacked on other grant programs, such as those offered by Mass State. So that's why we're seeing a switch. Also, considering the power purchase agreement, basically you're involving a third party, and they're there to make profit. So without really getting into too much of the numbers, you know, there's going to be less money that's coming to the city. It's still beneficial, yeah, but are you getting 100% or 80% or 70% or 60%, you know, of what's available? So I'll stop. There are two hands up. I think Mark had his hand up first, and then Stacy.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I just wanted to clarify, Stacy's comments were correct, but when you do a power purchase agreement, you're basically leasing your roof to a company that owns the solar panels that are on your roof, and any of the benefits go to the owner of the solar panels. So if you own them, then the 30% investment tax credit from the federal government is yours. And any of the incentives from National Grid are yours. If you PPA it, it's the company that owns the PPA. So I just want to clarify that. And a question of maintenance for the solar panels. The maintenance is minimal. The equipment that's inside the building is the one that takes most of the maintenance, and sometimes you can set up a contract outside of the DPW for very short money for somebody to maintain the inverters and the equipment that's used to convert the sun into the electricity. Panels do need to be cleaned occasionally, but again, you can set up a contract with somebody that will do that once every year or once every 18 months. And they also will take care of any damage if some damage happens to panels, which is very rare. But it's mostly the equipment that's inside the building that has to be maintained on occasion, just like any other mechanical equipment. You know, if you have to change a filter or whatever, I mean, that's what it takes. So it's not, maintenance wise isn't huge. But the real point I wanted to make was PPA, if they own it, you don't.
And Stacy had her hand up next.
Yeah, so that's all true. So a couple things. First, like, I mean, you would have to talk about renewable energy too, like how much would this generate would, you know, throughout the city. That, you know, that's one aspect. And then back to the maintenance. So you have to hire a separate company to maintain it, but also when you own it, you have to keep track of, is it in commission? You know, like you have to make sure you're reviewing, and you wouldn't know that unless you looked at your bills. So there's so much, you know, it's great, you get all the benefits of owning it, but it's also a lot more work. So we just have to keep that in mind. You know, I don't know if you have any additional comments on that one.
Ben has his hand up, but I'll just say so.
No, Brian, you know, let me just chime in. I think these are the questions that a study answers. You know, and then also and then perhaps design answers as well. And so I really agree with Stacy. The best case scenario here is that, you know, the city does a study that, you know, incorporates a number of buildings, whatever buildings the city is interested in, right? And then we ensure that you know, any system at EVS is similar to what's happening in other places, right? Like that's the best way to go. And yet on the other hand, you know, we have an opportunity here for all this to be, you know, paid for in an already identified and approved funding source. Okay, and that's different than any other project, right? And we're thinking about solar. So I don't think we're gonna resolve this here, but I do think that we have to identify soon which path the city will take, and it could be one or the other. You know, either, you know, all in on a larger study, which of course can still mean that EVS moves ahead on its own, even after a more comprehensive study, or, you know, the city's on a different time frame, and we go ahead on a study here and see what we learn. And then, you know, after the fact, you can always, you know, and I guess my question, you know, is who needs to be involved in making that decision? You know, clearly Gemma, Stacy, John Dunn, probably myself, you know, maybe Kathy, I'm not sure really, but, you know, I'm happy to talk to John about that. But definitely, you know, I think that's the immediate next step. And we don't have to, you know, we will resolve all the important questions folks are raising here, but that's really through one or more studies.
Okay, Stacey, is there a hand up?
I have one more question. So MSBA, this isn't like reimbursable, right? Or is it?
I can't say for sure. Basically, it would be executed as a change order to job. We would make a case for it to the MSBA, and each change order that we submit, the MSBA reviews individually, and they make a decision on whether they participate or not. So we've had some change orders that the MSBA has not participated in, which is not uncommon, but we've also had some where they have participated. So, you know, considering that there's additional funding that's going to be allocated to this project, and that ultimately this general sense of using sustainable energy is something that is very much supported in public policy, I can't say what they'll do, but that's not a bad thing for them, you know, to be considering.
Right, it's something that the state and others are really supporting, and they've supported other projects. So, you know, it's not again, can't guarantee it, but it's the sort of thing that that is easier to approve than other things like because of that.
Because like my only concern is, so then we're gonna drag this. We're gonna like not close out MSBA this project for like another year, you know, and that's not even reimbursable. Like that's what I'm wondering.
So yeah, so as far as the closeout goes, we don't. I mean, there is a chance that it could be delayed, but right now I would not project that. As far as the timeline goes, let's say we would move ahead with the study. We would have the study done maybe in December. Then if the results of the study are satisfactory, then we'd move through with the design. That would be done before the spring is up. And then we could get those panels installed as soon as the weather is appropriate to do that. We're still going to be doing work on the job site come spring. We have work that needs to be done around the playground. You know, we're still going to be around. Our on-site representative, Dennis, will still be around to accommodate those things, as will W.T. Rich to handle those remaining items. So the closeout for the project won't happen until after all those items are, well, it won't even begin until after all those items are completed anyway. So as far as I can see right now, it's not likely. Now, one thing that is unknown is how quickly does National Grid respond? And with solar, there is a chance that it can take longer than you might anticipate otherwise. But generally, that seems to happen when you're adding a lot of solar to an area that has maybe an older grid or there haven't been recent improvements, and they're not really familiar with what's going on. In this particular case, our situation is a little different. It doesn't guarantee what National Grid will do, but we have a building that was designed to be solar ready. When we spoke with National Grid about the sizing of the transformer, we provided that information to them, and they asked us, what the anticipated output would be if we were to add solar to the project, which we told them we would expect that would happen at some point in the future. So we provided that preliminary information to them. This is an all-electric building that also is a little bit more unusual. So there's already a vast power need for this building. And in order to accommodate this need, National Grid had to upgrade the infrastructure surrounding the building for the energy to be able to flow. With the solar that's added to this building, again, we'll know after the study, but the anticipation would be that it's not going to generate enough energy to fully power everything in the building, let alone to send a bunch of electricity back to the grid. So that's usually where that trouble comes in. If you're trying to send a bunch of electricity from a new power plant, essentially, onto the grid, National Grid needs to make sure that their network can handle that influx of energy. So kind of a lengthy explanation, and I see a few hands up. But the short of it is that the feeling now is that this work could be accomplished within the regular process that we're working through because of some of these items that have already pushed out the completion of the project until later next year. So I'm not sure whose hand was up first, but Jonathan, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just want to sort of simplify this. The study that you're proposing that we do, any of that, the information that we're going to get out of that would not be contradictory to any study that the city did on the whole. It would just be work they would not have to do, correct?
Yes. Yeah, the study will basically look at the roof surface area, look at the location of the building, look at any shading, shading from mechanical equipment, and determine how much solar, capacity you can put on there and what the output could be. And then based on current rates and so forth, what the likely return on investment would be for this project.
So that's what was, that's the information we'd need to considering spending $500,000 to do this, hopefully with getting half of it back. But the $10,000 seems like a small investment for information that we're going to use eventually, no matter what. We're going to get there, whether it's because the city does a citywide thing or the school does something individually. So I would urge us to proceed with a study.
Yep. I agree, John. It's short money, and also, but that's checking with John Dunn, because John Dunn can potentially make a decision quickly on whether on whether time he'll and Stacy and Jen will have a good idea of what the time frame the city's on. They may not line up, and so, but we can work that through pretty quickly, I think. But I think on this, we have to do a study one with the other on this project.
Yeah, and I'm just saying the funding is there in place to do this study, and it's not going to, it's only going to supplement anything the city does down the road.
Got it. Yep. Totally get it.
I just wanted to add I'm sorry, just real quick, Brian. I just wanted to add to the comments about the citywide solar. You do have to engage, and Brian made a very good point that stole a little bit of my thunder about the rate that National Grid responds to inquiries of potential interconnection studies, area studies of their grid to support the things that they need to do. But there are limits that they set on areas in cities of how much solar can be produced. So my advice would be, if you're talking citywide, including the school, you need to engage National Grid in a conversation about if there are limits set on what you can do in your area.
Thanks, Mark. So, you know, we've talked a lot, a lot of good questions, a lot of good aspects to these various things. So I'm trying to, kind of pull this all together from what I'm hearing, but it sounds like, the consideration is, do we move ahead with this first step just to determine what the solar capacity is for this building using funding that's available? Either this project will move forward on its own, or it could be rolled into a city project if that made sense and the timeline was appropriate. I understand that, there's some input that's desired from John Dunn, I think, as well. So, that could always be done if the committee as a whole that's here, I mean, John's not on this call tonight, unfortunately, but I guess if the committee were to vote to go ahead and move in this direction, on the city level, we could get that confirmed prior to executing any amendment for the electrical engineer to do the work. So
I would like to not. I would like to wait and just have him weigh in before we all take a vote, and then do a purchase order for $10,000. If I don't know, is that possible?
I think the opposite, which is I would rather us take a vote because we're not going to meet for another 2 months, and make that motion pending agreement of city administration. And that way, if for whatever reason you, Brian, and Mark can't, there's other issues that don't seem obvious that we can't get beyond, but to approve a $10,000 expenditure, knowing what we have in general, not the specific number, in terms of what we haven't spent on this, it would seem that that is good information to have. And if for whatever reason they say no, then you can report back to us, or whoever's, part of that discussion. But it would seem timing is, we're not urgent, but I don't think waiting 2 months to have another full meeting makes sense, given that we built a building solar ready. We'd probably want some more information to add on top of that. So we're just more interested about what that means.
Okay, I like that. And it would be not to exceed 10,000, or?
Yeah, we actually don't have the estimate from the engineer, but we feel like it would be below that $10,000 number.
Okay, I think we got two things before us that we need to resolve before we close out. And the first one is the tax credits. So
is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we need two motions here, and I'd be in the purpose of moving it forward. I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the OPM to purchase 3 renewable energy credits for the school. For the $7,500.
Second.
Wait, can I say one thing? Did you discuss it with Gemma though? Because I just want to make sure before we go ahead and do this that we're not doing it like we have to make sure we're not over the. I don't know a lot about this, but she does.
This is about the tax credits, the renewable energy
tax credits. Okay.
Credits. That's all we're talking about right now. Then we'll make a motion about the solar study. So this is just to purchase renewable energy credits, which will enhance our ability to achieve LEED Gold status for the building.
Yeah, Michelle, I see you have your hand up as well. You want to add something about the LEED part or solar?
Not about the tax credits, just a directive about what should be included in the scope of the study. So if we are looking at renting.
Well, let's finish this, the motion on the tax credits, and then we'll talk about the study.
So John, are you looking for a second? Is that a motion? You're looking for a second?
I think Kathy seconded.
Yeah. Kathy
So
seconded.
we are in the discussion stage.
So I fully support this, okay? And I just want to state what I think is odd, that they're willing to give 4 points or whatever. You know, we're only getting 3, right? 4 points or a point for $2,500, where like solar, which will benefit the building for decades, gets the same number of points. I just think that is totally odd. Okay,
Yeah,
but these are rules, and they're rules, and so I think it makes sense at this very low cost to go fully for the renewable energy credits.
There
Yeah,
any
I agree, and I did question that, you know, with the sustainability consultant, but they do this stuff every day. That's, you know, their bread and butter. So they said that, yes, that is how it works.
So is there any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the motion is to authorize the OPM to and authorize to spend $7,500 to purchase 3 renewable energy credits, and it's been moved and seconded, and so now we'd like to have a roll call vote, please.
Yep. Jonathan Pope,
Yes.
Ben Lummis,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Amy Pasquarello,
Yes.
Grant Harris,
Yes.
John. Gary
Okay.
Frisch,
Yes.
Katie Eunice,
Yes.
Stacy Capone,
Yes.
It
Thank you.
passes unanimously, and thank you very much. Now, the next thing is to authorize the next motion, and let me make this motion so that we can see if everybody likes it. We would authorize the OPM to purchase a study for the solar assessment of the building for an amount not to exceed $10,000, and subject to approval by the city administration.
Second that.
Okay.
Jonathan Pope.
Well,
no,
is there
wait,
any
wait,
discussion?
one second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And I think Michelle wanted to add something about
Yeah.
the study. I don't know. You want to bring that up, Michelle?
Just when we get the final approval, or if that happens, we just need to know what the scope should be for those options, and we can receive that in writing after.
Yeah, we can work that out. We talked about a little bit, but basically, I mean, the scope of the study is going to say how much solar can we generate on this roof? You know, what's the net payoff going to be? That's kind of what the big picture is.
I was actually referring a little bit more to like the options. You know, are we exploring the rental units as well as the ownership? But we can work that out after you all have your vote.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's have a roll call vote then.
Jonathan Pope,
Yes.
Ben Lummis.
Yeah.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Amy Pasquarello,
Yes.
Grant Harris,
Yes.
Gary Frisch,
Yes.
Katie Eunice,
Yes.
Stacy Capone.
Yes.
Thank you.
It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that we need to discuss before we adjourn?
We just had an update on the CM, so I'll just say that the punch list is 99% complete. As of today, we still have the temporary certificate of occupancy that had to be renewed. but the final inspection for the final certificate of occupancy was completed. We were just waiting on the sign off from the DPW. I spoke to Mike today. He said he did get that signature in, so we should have the final certificate of occupancy in hand any day now. So that was pretty much the only update that I wanted to add for the CM. So that's it. We won't be meeting until January. So if we don't talk, I wish everyone on here a good rest of the year.
Some of us will be approving invoices with you before then.
Okay, is there anything else that anybody would like to bring up before we adjourn? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
There we go. Roll call vote, please.
Jonathan Pope,
Yes.
Ben Lemus,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Amy Pascarello,
Yes.
Grant Harris,
Yes.
Gary Frisch,
Yes.
Katie Eunice,
Yes.
Stacy Capone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned, and everybody enjoy all of the events coming up.
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
holidays if we don't see you.
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
Bye all.